Automated traffic now exceeds human traffic on the internet, or at least it seems that way to me. And a growing share of this automation is not benign. It's intelligent, adaptive, and powered by artificial intelligence. Credential stuffing at scale, API abuse that mutates in real time, and fraud systems probing for weaknesses at machine speed. This battle is not coming. It is already here. This is the bot war, a world where attackers don't sleep, don't hesitate, and don't make human mistakes. In this episode of the Asia Tech Podcast, we want to know, when machines are attacking at machine speed, how do digital businesses defend themselves without breaking the platforms they're trying to protect? To help us unpack this and more, we are joined by Guy Brown, Staff Enterprise Security Architect, APJ at Fastly, and Tony Jarvis, Field CISO, APJ at Darktrace. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining. How are you guys doing today?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Okay, this is going to be great. Let's just jump right into this. In an era where artificial intelligence empowers both defenders and adversaries, how would you kind of characterize or define this bot war? And why are AI-scaled attacks now one of the most critical cyber risks facing digital businesses? Tony, why don't we start with you?
Sure. No worries. So, look, it all comes back to this issue we've been grappling with for the longest time in cybersecurity. And we give it different names. Some people call it the arms race. Others call it this game of cat and mouse. You know, technology evolves. And the defenders, those people that are trying to protect our organizations, they're using it for good. They're using it to protect. But then there are the adversaries, the attackers, the cyber criminals, whatever you want to call them, state actors. And they're seeking to exploit it for their own gain. So, if you're not using AI to defend yourself, you're at a massive disadvantage, because the other side is, and that's not hyperbole, that's just matter of fact. So where it becomes a really pressing issue is, I refer to it in terms of what I call the 3 Vs. It's volume. There are just way, way, way more attacks now compared to before. It's velocity. Those attacks that we're seeing are much, much faster. And then there's variety. And if you're talking about things like spear phishing emails, as an example, people used to have to manually create those. They would write them, they'd research their victim, they'd try to make it sound really convincing. That's all done using software today, and it's done in milliseconds. So if you're not using AI to defend, you are at a massive disadvantage.
Guy, what do you think?
Yeah, if I can add on to that, for sure, yeah. And that's definitely what we're seeing as well. And I think one of the aspects of AI is that it really lowers the barrier to entry as well. You can create pretty sophisticated tools without any programming knowledge. So I think, in addition to what Tony said, definitely, I think that lower barrier to entry is definitely something that we've seen, all across. The amount of automated threats. Most reports show that it's more than 50% of web traffic, and we talk to people every day, and I think that might even be a bit light on, like if you add on things like AI scrapers and crawlers, as well as the malicious bot traffic and things like that, then it's quite a significant amount.
Can we dig a little bit deeper into this? Is this because artificial intelligence itself has been around for a while, right? But what was it, like 2 or 3 years ago? I can never remember. I say this on the show all the time. Like, I feel like time is a flat circle. Like when these LLMs got rolled out, was it 2023? I can't remember anymore, but let's just say it was 2023. How has that changed the way AI gets used to do these, to make these attacks? But also on the flip side, how has that helped the defenders as well, if it makes sense? And you're right, like I do feel like this is some kind of war going on, right? But how has this new stuff that's actually come out recently changed the way this stuff works?
You want to take that, Guy?
Sure, yeah. Well, personally, certainly from what I've seen, it just makes things easier. As the, the well-known LLMs like ChatGPT is pretty much a household item now. Like everybody uses it. You don't have to be a technology person. My wife uses it every day. So that has sort of led people starting to use this stuff. But I think all of the AI companies have made their tools more and more powerful all the time now. They've moved to not only just a replacement of like a search engine, for example. They're moving it into really advanced like research stuff. It's really great at translation. It's really great at coding more and more. That's been a huge focus with a lot of, well, basically all of the AI vendors really. So, and moving that into dedicated coding tools and command line tool stuff. That is, the using AI on a coding command line like Codex from AI from OpenAI and Gemini and Claude all have their own agents, and they become really, really powerful because they start moving into this sort of like agentic model where you can assign AI really prioritize tasks to go do things, and that, I think, having all that together really makes it a fairly formidable thing to defend against when you have an attacker with resources that is has a focus in mind.
Yeah, and I'd echo similar sentiments. On the protective side, the defender side,
Yeah.
generative AI, it offers specific advantages. We can understand language patterns. We can get really good at creating our own internal phishing tests for things like user awareness training, security training. But the attackers have really sort of taken to it very well, which works against us, of course. They're able to write really convincing phishing emails, trying to coerce you to click on a link, open an attachment, and then it'll take you somewhere malicious. It'll start a chain of events that leads to malware being installed on your endpoint. But in the early days, this was quite easy. They did have some built-in controls, and they'd say, look, we can't do that. That sounds like it's unethical. And then you'd sort of say, well, look, I work in academia. This is for research purposes. Oh, okay, sure, no problem.
Right.
They've tightened up on that now, of course. But there are many, many versions of these tools. There's the legitimate ones, and then there's a whole bunch of what we call forks, which are basically taking that and making tweaks to actually make it malicious. You can actually ask it to do really, really bad things that it shouldn't be doing. And that's what it's now specifically purpose-built for. So that's what we're up against.
Can I ask you guys this? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, and there are certainly over the last 6 months, I would say, there's been a huge amount of increase in open source tools. You can find them on GitHub. Similar, probably the most famous one is like OpenClaw and things like that, which are designed to be able to be task driven, and it's all open source code. You can fork it, as Tony said, and just modify any of the boundaries that may have been imposed by the original developers to do whatever you like. Really.
So this is the thing I was thinking about. I did a whole episode on OpenClaw, and I did another whole segment on Claude 4.6. So and again, I'm not an expert here, right? But I've been thinking a lot about this, and since you guys brought both of those things up, one of the things that I think I learned is that this stuff no longer sits at like the periphery of these systems, right? Particularly the agentic stuff gets embedded on the inside of the system. And then there's all this permission-based stuff that allows them to be some level of autonomous, right? And again, tell me where I'm wrong or if my presumptions are wrong. But if somehow hackers can get inside, like they're not at the periphery anymore, but they're inside this system and then can control that agentic AI, like what are the implications of that from a risk and a risk mitigation standpoint, if that makes sense? And am I completely wrong here, or do I have something right?
Every attacker wants to get into an organization's environment.
Yeah.
And the first problem is, how do we get in? And that's when we look at internet facing software and services that have vulnerabilities and they get exploited. But they get in, and getting in is not their end game. That's just the starting point.
Right.
What they do next is really up to them. What is their mission or their objectives that they're trying to fulfill? And having AI agents, agentic AI systems, generative AI tools that are already installed on the endpoint really gives them a huge advantage, because they typically have a lot of permission. They have permission to read sensitive files. They've got access to intellectual property, and you can converse with it in human natural language. So all they really need to do, if the permissions permit, is say, look, I need this specific information, give it to me, dump it out, I'm going to take a copy of it. And if data exfiltration is their aim, it's made their job much, much easier.
Is there sorry, were you going to say something, Guy?
I was going to say, yeah, and it's even gotten to the point where you can buy security tools now, like security information and event management, and logging tools that will look at AI agents as like an automated workforce, where you need to still monitor them. You don't implicitly trust them. You treat them. You look at what the intent of what they're trying to do is, because you never know. When those boundaries have been modified or doing things they're not supposed to.
Yeah, and look, I was reading a report from Anthropic yesterday. I was reading it this morning, actually, but they put it out yesterday, the day before, just talking about what levels of autonomy most people are giving, like in the real world. And I think they said it was something like 5 to 6%, but that it's growing faster. And it's not like model dependent. It doesn't matter how great the model is or how bad the model is. It's just how used to using the agents that the AI, I mean, that the people are, whether they give it like certain levels of autonomy. I'm curious about this, though. And again, I think it was something that Tony said that just made me think about this. Is there a social engineering aspect to this as well? In other words, one of the things that a guy that I was speaking to earlier today said is that the AI voice technology and even AI video technology is getting so good that you could literally, is there a way to social engineer this hacking in a way where you can literally get into a system with someone just opening the door for you because they feel like you deserve to get in that door, if that makes sense? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You go, Guy.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, like that's definitely an issue. Like with the way the AI audio companies are doing now, it only needs like 5 seconds or so of audio to be able to just create a conversation. And when you look at, like, I'm in Sydney. Our Australian government, one of their two-factor authentication is your voice. So when I ring up my our Australian tax office, I have to say in Australia. Oh, actually, I probably even shouldn't say it.
Don't say it because someone's going to tape it. Right? Like, but think about it. Think about how scared you are. But
if I said that key phrase and somebody recorded it, that is the way to get into an account if you have all the other details of that person. So.
Yeah, exactly. It is so easy now for a threat actor to clone your voice, to clone video of you. And look, it is so convincing. We really need to rely a lot more on policy than just purely technology. It's the old sort of saying that it's people, process, and technology. All three do have to come together. I can tell you, I'm now at a stage where I will double check everything. If somebody I know and trust sends me a link, sends me an attachment, even if I'm expecting it, I will actually go to them out of band. So if they send me an email, I'll message them on Teams and I'll say, look, I got this. Just confirm. I can click on this. This is from you. Because, I mean, once bitten, twice shy. We are at the point now you cannot tell just by inspection alone.
But so this is actually fascinating for me. Just on this podcast alone, right? We've only been here for like 5 or 6 minutes. But Guy was already afraid to say like whatever his catchphrase was or his password phrase for fear that, like, that's how deeply you're thinking about it. And Tony's suggesting that even when somebody internally sends him a link, you still make the phone call. I'm just using that as a proxy, right? Yeah. To whoever the guy or gal was that sent it to you just to make sure that it's okay. That makes me really scared in a way. Like, because I feel like I'm pretty good at this. Like, I've been around the internet for most of my adult life. And every time I see a link in a mail that comes from somebody, even if it says Google or Meta or Facebook, whatever, I never click on it. I've just been trained to do this for like the last 35 years. I won't even click on it if somebody tells me to. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I'll have my buddy send me a link in chat, but I'll never click on anything in a mail. But the fact that the two of you that are involved in security and you do it every single day, you're so scared, makes me wonder, like, just how bad this is.
And look, some of this, sorry, Guy, you go.
No, go for it. Yeah, that's right.
I was just going to say, some of this, to be fair, may just be by virtue of our profession. We do often see the worst side of the internet. We do sometimes see the worst side of humanity. People are doing really nasty things to other people they don't know and taking money and far, far worse. So we are on heightened alert at all times. And in a work context, you would want to rely on, well, look, we've got security protecting our email, so nothing can get to us. And we know nothing is bulletproof. We rely on those things. We need them. You can't rip them out. They're an absolute must. But again, you need to train your users. You need to have policies in place. You need to have processes. All of these things have to come together.
So sorry, God, were you going to say something before?
Oh yeah, well, it would sort of add on to that as well. It's like, and like the user is probably the most important line of defense, and I think maybe on a side topic for another day is like you need to make security training, engaging, effective, because most people have got the same security training about phishing every year, and they just click all the way through. It doesn't help anybody. Certainly doesn't help the security of the organization. But
yeah, I mean, I think we could spend an entire day talking about training for this stuff. I remember when I was at Goldman Sachs, they made us do training for a whole bunch of different things, and it was really just like clicking on this thing until it was done, and then going back to work. But some of this stuff is actually pretty serious. So if the tools out there are really great for attacking, then the tools out there are really great for defending. I always feel like offense is easier because you know what you're going to do, and the defense is trying to figure out what you're going to do. I know they say defense wins championships, but that's another story for another time. But you understand the idea, right? Like the offense can make up their thing first. They can do a whole bunch of different stuff. They can iterate way before you've even thought about it. Yeah. But then you've got to come and defend this stuff. Like, what is a really effective strategy for doing this? And like, what are the types of things that people should pay attention to? If someone's listening to this and they're thinking, I feel like I'm covered, what are some of the places where you think maybe they're not covered, even if they think they are? And let's leave training aside, if that's okay.
Do you want to take first step, Guy?
Sure, yeah. I'll take it certainly from, from my background. I deal a lot of in web application security and help organizations in that side. And certainly there's no longer this concept of static rules anymore and things like that. If you're dealing with an ever evolving AI attacker who is really modifying their attack in real time based on what they're seeing back from you, you can't really have like static, really more of the traditional sort of static controls, static tools that really you set a rule in place and it's looking for keywords and that's your policy. Certainly that's an important layer that you have to be looking at intent and behavior rather than any sort of attack pattern, because if an attack pattern is a thing of the past, it's not happening right now. So
for sure,
you're always going to be on the defense if you're just looking for things that everybody already knew about.
Yeah, and I mean, fully agree. And for what it's worth, I'd just add a little onto that. You're right. The things like signatures and threat intelligence and known bad lists and that sort of thing, it's important. No one's going to say get rid of it. It serves a valid purpose. It's a really efficient way of finding something that we know is bad. Right. But the issue is that when something is bad, you've got the things that you've seen before and you already are aware of, and that's known. But there's all this unknown stuff, and it keeps increasing all the time. It's getting faster and faster. And that's one of the really dangerous things about AI when it's used by the attackers. Their ability to create things that are malicious, that we have never seen before, is super fast and super sophisticated. So that means that the old way of doing it, that we put all our eggs in one basket and rely on rules and signatures and policies. Look, it's great for the things that have circulated around the internet and is coming up at us second, third, fourth. But increasingly, we need to start understanding behavior. If we can understand what normal looks like for a given organization, a given environment, and then we can understand by extension of that, well, look, what is unusual? The advantage it gives us is that, sure, not everything that's unusual is going to be malicious. But if something is malicious and it gets in and it starts moving around, it starts trying to steal data, it's going to be doing things that are unusual. And they're the things you go looking for. And it's a super nice complement to your traditional security. It's not one or the other. You can and you should have both working together.
So how do you define, and again, there's no real definition for this, but I think you've made me think about this in reverse now, right? You can either constantly be playing defense, and I want to talk a little bit about adaptive AI as well, because if they're using it, we should be using it too, right? Like you can't just sit there and go, okay, the fence is built and now we're safe, because now they're figuring out different ways to either get through the fence or over the fence or under the fence, and you have to keep up with them. But how do you, if you're a company, look at yourself and say, define at scale what normal behavior is? Because if you look at it in reverse, Instead of looking for all the abnormal things, you're just like, this is a normal status for like what we're doing in our software stack and inside the perimeter of all the stuff, all the technology that we're using, all of our databases, all this kind of stuff. Then when something weird happens, it's abnormal. Yeah. Does that make, can you train that as well? Is that something that people do or should be doing?
Yeah, and this is where the advantage of things like machine learning and AI really comes to benefit the defender side. Because if you wanted to do this manually, you can't. I mean, how can Impossible. You define all of the things that would be normal? You can't. I mean, I visit this website today, I visit a different website tomorrow. Is that malicious? No. But you can't sort of put that into rules and policies. Where we look at the problem from in computer science is really coming down to being able to feed lots and lots of raw data into these machine learning or AI models, understand, what sort of things are happening, make sense of it, and put some structure around it. Say, look, this is normal for my specific device or me as a user. What about the people I work with in my team? People in HR do very different things from people in the engineering department.
Exactly.
And then you can look at it, we call this clustering. You can look at it just at the enterprise level itself. Has any device in this enterprise ever talked out to some random IP address on the internet, for example, and really sort of taking it down to the machine learning models, getting into the computer science. And we've got lots of different ways we can do this. There's lots and lots of different types of AI. We were founded on what we call Bayesian modeling, but there's so many others, and we layer them. And we have this expression we like to use. We use the right type of AI to solve the right type of problem. They're all good at different things. So you want to be using them eclectically.
Can you maybe give an example of that? Like even just explaining what this Bayesian logic is for people that may not understand what it is. And then just give an example of like how it would be used, or any other type of logic, how it would be used to help the defensive side.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, at its roots, super simple. It's really about understanding normal. And if you think about it in probability statistics terms,
Yep.
You've got your sort of average plus or minus 2 standard deviations. Let's just go back to high school sort of stuff. That's telling you like 95% of the stuff should look something like this. Now, it's
Yep.
way more complicated than that, of course, and I don't pretend to understand it inside out. But it's really looking at it as a mathematical issue and putting modeling around it and getting into the maths. But then you're able to say, well, look, maybe I do use a specific service and I do log on to a specific URL or IP address, but hey, I don't log on at this time of day. And then you can say, well, that's a simple rule. Maybe they're traveling. Okay, fine. But then after I logged on at this random time of day that's not normal, I then did something else. And I've never done that immediately upon logging into the service. And then, by the way, something from my machine started connecting to some other server we have internally. And you start seeing a pattern of activity. And none of this, I mean, all of this individually is unusual, but okay, it's not super serious. But when you start chaining it all together, and what's the probability of this followed by that, and then we see this, and it really starts raising red flags. So that's the sort of things we go looking for.
Have we, sorry, you just triggered something else in my head. And Guy, feel free to comment on this or even go back and comment on what Tony just said. But before I forget, sometimes when you watch these movies about criminals, they'll like kind of stake out a place for like a month or two. Do you know what I mean? They'll watch the behavior in the bank. And I'm just using this as a metaphor, right, for online behavior. They'll see who's doing what, how often they do what, when the security guard like goes for lunch, all this kind of stuff, and making sure that that's normal so that they can learn how to mimic that, or at least find out when that gap is open. Are we seeing people use, and again, you said before, even on the defensive side, you can't do all this stuff and understand what normal is manually because it would just take, thousands of years to do. But with artificial intelligence, you can run through all these processes and procedures for almost everybody inside your enterprise to be able to figure what that is. But are there examples of sort of malicious actors kind of sneaking into a system and then doing nothing except watch? Do you know what I mean? For like a month or two. And then they understand what Tony's behavior is. And they understand what Guy's behavior is. They start mimicking your behavior because like if they're playing a long game, let's say they're trying to steal data or they're trying to steal money, it's way easier to steal it in little bits and pieces for sure, but definitely harder to steal it right away. So have we seen behavior like this where, you know what I mean? Like someone sneaks into your house, they're sitting there watching for a couple of months, and then slowly but surely they start to mimic your behavior. And then at some point they kind of become you. And then it becomes much easier using AI tools. Sorry, go ahead.
Guy, do you want to have a go?
Yeah, sure. So that's certainly common for nation state actors. Certainly more of those sophisticated sort of actors. But yeah, there's definitely a shift from the old days of getting in and it was all about destruction. Now it's getting in, it's all about not being seen.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole concept of living off the land, where once the attacker is inside the environment, they're using the tools that are already there. Because if they bring in new tools, then you'll get it's easier to spot those. So you use the tools that are on the different machines. They start discovering what else is in the environment. Can they get anybody's credentials? Things like that. So yeah, it's definitely that's definitely a big shift over. I don't know what time period, but it's been quite a while now that has been a change in focus for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And there's different words for it. Some people call it, low and slow attacks. Other people will call it stealthy attacks, as opposed to the sort of smash and grab where you're in, you try to do as much damage and destruction as fast as possible, and then you're out. And look, it is harder to spot, especially if you're relying on traditional methods. But when you do have the benefit of advanced technologies, and they're almost commonplace today, it's not nice to have AI defenses. It really is must have today. And I don't think there's any argument around that. But they are now able to correlate. They're able to do a lot of the triage for us, a lot of the correlation, and say, look, even if a specific attack will have multiple steps, and we refer to this as the cyber kill chain. They have to get in. Then they need to figure out what exists inside that might be worth, their time. Then they move from machine to machine. They escalate their privileges. They start exfiltrating data. Multiple steps. Just because they're doing those steps, days, weeks, months apart, we still have a record of it. We still keep all of that data. And we're able to go through all of that data and make those correlations and associations that all of these steps happened and they are linked, they are associated. It just would take a huge amount of time to do that manually. But we can still definitely do that, and we do that with machine learning AI technologies today.
One thing great about AI is that it can take a huge amount of data and find patterns in it. I think that's such a powerful thing. I do that for even myself. Created like my own MCP tools to plug into various different security solutions, and you just ask it like real world things about, hey, what things did I see last night that I need to be worried about, and then it can just take this enormous amount of data that you may miss. So yeah, I think it's a key part of any sort of defense.
I feel like there's a lot of detective work going on here. And I think and you'll see where I'm going with this in a second, but I think if you ask a normal detective, like just a guy or a gal who's out there like trying to find physical crime or trying to solve a physical crime, they'll tell you that like solving it is fun, if that makes sense, right? Like, oh my God, I just figured this thing out. Have either of you been involved in a situation where, somebody has infiltrated a system and you were involved in actually finding out that happened before something actually super bad happened? And we're able to like disintermediate or mitigate that, if that makes sense.
I can.
You don't have to say who it is or where it was for sure, because that's none of my business. But you understand the point, yeah?
No, I totally get it, and I can tell you that I've seen multiple events where we have things like early stage ransomware. We have what would turn out to be very severe attacks.
Yeah.
But we are able to stop it in its early stages, and getting in is the first stage. It's there, and then you want to actually find it, detect it, and get it out. But then if you're able to do that quickly, it doesn't have the chance to move around, do additional damage, steal property, intellectual property. The organizations that rely on these tools and they see it working day to day, they definitely appreciate the value that it brings. I've worked on the other side where if you think about a function like incident response, you essentially have something that has gone wrong. And then you become the detective and you try to go and you figure out where it is, how much damage has been done. You try to sort of contain it while you're working towards remediating it. That is a very high pressure, high stakes situation. The people that work in the thick of that definitely love that side of things. But I can tell you on the customer side who's going through the pain of they are the victim, not everybody is having a good day when that's the case.
No. Definitely not. How do you think what is the right way to communicate this risk? I mean, one of the things you mentioned earlier, or Guy mentioned earlier, was about training. I don't necessarily want to just focus on that, but like, how can we convince people inside of big companies that they're actually at risk? And again, I want to share something with you. I don't know if I shared this with either one of you on the prep call, but I remember one day sitting with a lady that I was trying to help with her business, and she wanted to show me her website, which had just been redesigned. This is a few years ago. And she went to the URL for her website. We were just sitting in a cafe, and it had been completely hacked and redesigned. And it looked like, I don't know, some Eastern European person, because the language was Eastern European, had just like taken over the whole thing. So she hadn't done any security. But the question is like, how do you communicate this risk to people in a way where they're actually convinced that this is a problem? Or does something bad have to happen first? You know what I mean? Does someone have to break into your house and steal your TV before you put a lock on the door, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I feel like there's a million different answers I could give, and the right answer will be the right answer for the right organization. Every organization's needs are different.
Fair enough.
It also depends who you're talking to inside the organization. So
Yeah.
technical teams will want data that is technical by nature, and they'll be concerned with things like, they call it the mean time to detect. How quickly on average can you find something wrong? Or the mean time to recovery, how quickly can you actually get things back on track? But when you start talking at a business level to the business leaders, the decision makers in the organizations, they start to want to know things like, well, look, is there any potential damage to our reputation? Are we up for any potential fines because we're in a regulated industry, as an example?
Yeah.
If we invest $1 there in terms of securing, we can't invest $1 somewhere else. So if we did get breached and something went wrong, what is the financial damage compared to how much would it cost to prevent that from happening? And which one is the lesser amount? So you start having some very nuanced conversations.
Yeah, you definitely have to communicate it at the right level. Certainly if you're like a CISO who has to talk to the board, you really need to put it at that business level where, you know, this is going to affect this many customers, affect this much revenue, things like that. But that, you know, the security ops person on the ground, that's so detached from what he's worried about or she's worried about. Yeah, you definitely need to pick the right levels. I mean, I've always dealt in application security where and most of my career it's all about protecting websites and things like that. And a lot of people, it's just like, I'm just a small shop in Australia. Why would anybody, want to affect my business? It's like, yeah, it's not always about how big you are or that you're not a big corporation. They're still. So my conversation at that point is to communicate, what value that an attacker has by taking over your website or your servers that are running your website, things like that, and then they start realizing, okay, yeah, there's definitely some risk there, and that they need to look at it.
Can we make the case, and again, I don't know what the percentage is, right? And I'm sure if I pick one, I'll be wrong. But can we make the case, and this is the perfect example of like how I think about this. You said like maybe it's a small business in some small town in Australia who's running a website, and they're like, why would anybody want to hack me? And in my mind, my answer would be, they don't even know who you are. They're not trying to hack you.
Yeah.
They're trying to hack everybody at the same time at scale. I mean, that's the problem, right? In the sense that they don't know who you are. They don't care who you are. It's literally like they're knocking on everybody's door in every town, in every city, in every country, in every state at the same time. And just the doors that open are the ones they go in. They don't care whose house. They don't know whose house. They're not like, I want to rob Tony or Guy. They're just like, Tony or Guy has a house along with everybody else in the world, and I'm trying to get in. Do I have that wrong?
No, perfectly correct. And the people that say, look, we're small, nobody's interested in us, you need to reframe. It's a different mindset. The attackers don't know who you are. It's all about scale. Their ability to target victims, they scale using software agents and AI. Their ability to infect them and load ransomware on their endpoints is automated. Their ability to receive payments to go and unlock all of those files is automated. There is literally no or very little human involvement in running that attack. So if you can do this to thousands and thousands and thousands of people, even if you're only making pennies on the dollar per victim, you sum it all up and they walk away with a hefty stack of cash at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I love telling this story because when I first started working at Morgan Stanley back in 1987, and you'll see where this is going in a second because it's completely relevant. There was a guy who worked in accounts payable, right? And he was literally stealing like the rounded pennies. And he did it over like a 7 or 8 year period of time. And he was taking like a couple of $1,000,000. But imagine doing that at scale all over the world inside of like every company. They fired that guy at some point. But the point is that like you don't have to take a lot at one point in time. If the end game is money stealing, it ends up not being that hard. And I have like 100 other stories about like one of my friends, somebody pretended they were her mother and just had her send her $700, not $7,000, not $70,000, $700. But again, if you do that to 10 people a month, it's $7,000. Yeah.
And
Sorry.
especially when you start preying on emotion. So, you call a parent and you clone their child's voice and you say, I've been kidnapped, they need you to make this payment. Then the phone just cuts off and you can't call them back. So it's a pretty scary situation.
How do you at the board level or sort of at the senior management level balance this idea of security and usability, right? And again, this literally happened this morning. And when I was doing another recording, one of the guys that I was recording with runs, what do you call it? Norton antivirus on his computer. So not the same scale that we're talking about, but still an individual guy who's concerned about security, concerned about cybersecurity, trying to protect his machine, wouldn't let him log into this technology to be able to record. So he had to turn it off to do it. How do you balance that stuff, particularly at the scale that you're talking about?
It's not easy. Look, there's sort of a tongue-in-cheek conversation around the best security is never taking the computer out of the box.
Yeah, exactly. Never turning it on.
It's not going to be very usable or very practical to do that. You do need technology working. You try your very best to keep it safe. And it's a balancing act. It really is. We need to do things like enforce passwords, and they should be complex and they should be different from service to service. We need to do things like 2FA or MFA, multi-factor authentication. A password alone is not enough these days. And look, if I'm the user logging in, especially if I'm not working in the tech or the security department, it's a pain. It's an extra step I've got to go through. I just want to get on with my job. But we're at a point now, and I think most of society realizes, because we've seen so many cases of breaches on the front page of papers, we understand there is a need. And so that pushback we used to get, it's not the issue it used to be. But again, it's just about finding that middle ground. How much security is enough before it really impacts our ability to do our job and be productive?
Yeah. So the other thing that I'm thinking about here, and you mentioned this earlier, Tony, but I wanted to come back to it, is policy. And this idea of like ecosystem collaboration. I think I may have mentioned this to you guys when we were prepping, but we had David Agronovich, right, who's the global threat disruption head at Meta, on another one of on this show. Actually, he spent a lot of time talking about these like massive hacker factories, right? Just massive warehouses filled with computers that are just creating attacks in real time at all times. He mentioned actually some countries in this region. I don't want to mention them because I'm not into politics here. But in the old days, if you wanted to prevent crime in your town, it was a local issue. And then maybe it was a state issue depending on where you lived, right? And then I guess it's a national issue. But this is an international issue, right? Because the same type of cybersecurity threat or hacker threat, it's the same in California as it is in, Cambodia. There's really no difference, right? As long as your computer's turned on, it kind of looks the same. What type of coordination, what type of policy stuff needs to be discussed or thought about, or is being discussed or thought about, that's going to help here? Like, what are we really thinking about?
You want to take a go, Guy?
I'll let you start with that, and while I think about.
Yeah,
sorry, it's just popped into my head. You know what I mean?
No.
So,
yeah, it's a good one. It is an international issue for sure, and half of the challenge is trying to find out who's behind the attack. And this sort of goes into a bit of a muddy area, which could be a conversation in itself. Whenever somebody gets attacked or breached or whatever you want to call it, a lot of people, their default reaction will be, who is it? I want names. I want to know who this person is or who this entity is. And yes, you can do that. You can try to track them down and join the breadcrumbs together. And look, that will take you down a certain path. It takes a lot of time and effort to get there. So that can be very, very useful. Law enforcement agencies do that. They need to do that. But for the average organization, would you rather invest your limited resources trying to track down who's actually done the damage, or would you actually try to understand how they got in, how the damage was done, prepare for the next time, make sure that couldn't repeat itself, and actually improve your security. So that's one side of the conversation. Another one, which I think we all sort of know but needs to be pointed out, is even if you can pinpoint the individual, depending on which part of the globe they're living in, there may or may not be legal recourse available. So you have this working against you as well.
Yeah. Guy, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that's.
And is there a way that companies participate with each other and share best practices so that you can update? You know what I mean? Are you talking to not each other per se, like on this podcast, but are companies constantly talking to each other or going to symposiums and doing that kind of stuff where they can share best practices so that they can understand what's already happened to somebody else? You know what I mean? Like not necessarily talking about it publicly, but talking about it in a private way so people can learn and figure what the right thing to do is, right? And you're right, every company is different for sure, and every company's sort of system configuration is different. But at some high level, there must be some best practices. Is that going on as well? Like, are there conferences and stuff where this is taking place?
It is, and I'm really happy to see that the situation today is better than it was a few years ago. There is a lot more collaboration happening. A lot of technology vendors are putting really great efforts into integrations and opening up. Look, we will make our data available to other pieces of your security stack, and we'll be able to ingest it as well, so they can share. And of course, sharing information means better visibility. Better visibility means better security. You can't protect what you can't see, the old saying, but it's very true. Exactly. So I know that we put a lot of effort into that. Guy, you probably see exactly the same yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. We often get asked about, sharing our threat intel, and sometimes you do that with, like in the security industry, there's sort of like, there's a whole bunch of like frenemies who don't really want to give like everything, but we're all in it for the same reasons, to protect users from real threats. And I know you speak on the other point about the other people, do they get together? And like I've been for a long time involved in the banking and finance industry, and in Australia, at least, all of the banking community get together for no vendors, nobody else outside the industry allowed, and they'll have like fraud, a couple of days of like fraud sharing about like what they've seen, things like that. So it definitely does happen. Like people realize, I think all organizations realize that if one bank is being targeted, then that bad actor is going to be targeting everybody else. So it makes sense to share, techniques and procedures.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I feel like a company like Fastly just has access to so much information just because of the place that it sits. Do you know what I mean? In the landscape and the infrastructure of the internet, if that makes sense. You must see, I've been thinking about this the whole time we've been talking, but you must see way more stuff than most other companies, because you're like sitting up here watching all this traffic go around in every country, and you know what I mean? You must have access to so much information and so much analysis, no?
Yeah, well, we're a really globally distributed edge platform, fundamentally underpinning everything. So and we're one of those companies that everybody's using it, they just don't know, because we're bringing like streaming video, websites, all that stuff to you. So we see trillions and trillions of transactions constantly, and a lot of that we release a lot of the security findings in the interest of like sharing with the rest of the community and our customers and others. Things around how prevalent is bot attacks, AI specific bot attacks, even legitimate AI activity. And legitimate is dependent on the company. Some publishers don't think it's legitimate, that they're stealing all that stuff, but but e-commerce people want that as much AI activity as possible, because they need to get out there. So it's all about we see lots and lots of of that, which we publish pretty regularly. Every 3 months, I think it is, we have our DDoS reports and bot reports and various different things. So.
I'd love to see that. I don't know how either one of you guys sleep, to be fair. Okay, one more thing and then I'll let you go. Let's finish on this. Where do you think the threat landscape is heading if you have to look out 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is? And Tony, let's start with you.
Well, look, I think there are very few things I've seen over the course of my career that strike me as fundamentally different. Typically, year on year, you see evolution, more evolution than revolution. There have been a couple of things that have really made me sit up and take notice. For example, ransomware, the current incarnation of ransomware, which I'd trace back to 2016, I'd say that's one of them. Okay. Talking about things like linking that with cryptocurrency and being able to make payments and they're not traceable. Well, they kind of are, but it's a gray area. It's changed the game. I think AI is there. We've got this thing that we're starting to find uses for. We're starting to find ways it can protect us. We're starting to find ways that it can be exploited. And it is so much in its infancy. There is so much potential that is yet to be unlocked. We don't really know what the story is going to be 5 years from now. So I think it's a case of, look, we need to pay attention. We need to be learning. We need to be soaking up as much information as we can. And the biggest danger, the biggest trap we could fall into is trying to do security the way that was working for us 5-10 years ago. That's not going to work for us going forward. We've got to relearn our own industry. We've got to relearn our own day job. But hey, you sign up to a job in tech and you know what you're signing up for. And that's part of the fun.
Yeah, exactly. Guy, you can have the last word if you want it.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. This could also almost be a topic in itself, but I think if you're looking at where it's heading, like I think agentic AI, it gets a lot of press recently, but I think it's really going to change the way people defend from attacks as well. Given that you have these on one side you have these fully autonomous attack agents, which we also talked about, but on the other hand we have more and more real world uses of fully autonomous activities from AI agents. Like pretty soon, it won't be long before that is the way that people buy plane tickets or buy products and things like that. So as a defender, you can't just block all of the non-humans anymore because like I come from a bot background, and one of the big things is like, well, if you identify who is human, then you don't have to worry about the rest, because if you don't want any sort of automated traffic on your website, because typically automated traffic is targeting areas that you'd want to protect. But now that is legitimate traffic. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with this?
That's a really good point.
Yeah, it's sort of, and like there are people that companies like Google and such that are trying to address this problem. There's there's probably a whole different topic in itself, but allowing websites to expose specific tools to AI agents. So therefore, you may be able to put some more guidelines in there. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things we could talk about in terms of where the attack landscape is headed. But I think the most interesting one is how we're going to, protect and also enable, AI agents from doing good things and doing bad things.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Again, Anthropic, I think, or Perplexity, I can't remember who it was, but I think it was Anthropic, came out a couple of days ago and said I think they said they weren't going to let OpenClaw use their stuff because of the security issues associated with it. But you're right, they don't have to give it access to it if they don't want to. It's just another interesting way to think about it. But this idea that we can only block non-human traffic means that that's a problem. Well, it looks like Tony just dropped, but that's okay. Yeah. I'm going to thank both of you for doing this. Guy Brown, Staff Enterprise Security Architect, APJ at Fastly, and Tony Jarvis, Field CISO, APJ at Darktrace. Thank you so much for coming and doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great fun. Thank you.